worship committee is each going to take one, and our president is going to follow with the eighth principle, which is proposed up for adoption, I believe at the GA, General Assembly. So, I don't know who's first. So. All right. All I know is that it was number 5.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I have the pleasure of presenting our number 1 principle. Our principles came together in 1960 as the Unitarians and the Universalists were preparing their merger in 1961. These principles are neither doctrine or neither doctrine nor dogma, but rather a guide. As you know, reverence and respect for human nature is the core of Unitarian Universalism. We believe that all the dimensions of human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalist faith. So our first principle, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now you will see it slightly different. In fact, on your program it says, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every living thing. I don't think that is yet official. Does anybody say yay or nay? I mean, what?
Depends on who's doing the order of service.
Yeah.
I took the liberty, I think they're gonna vote on that again this year.
So it's not yet official.
Trying to slide that one in.
Okay. It still says every person, but sounds like every living thing. So one of these days. Okay, that's number 1. Who's number 2?
Principle number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Just a few simple words, but how do we put these words into practice and into our life? I think first we educate ourselves to the situation, to what's going on in our country and our state and politically, and we align ourselves with those people that believe in the things that we do, and that is in justice for those that are discriminated against, for people of color, women, from equality in the workplace to control over their own bodies and families. We support the LGBTIQA community so that they may gain acceptance to be who they are. And we seek opportunity for education and a chance for all to earn a living. We believe that medical care is a right and no one should suffer and die for the inability to pay for health care and medication. And we recognize the value of every human being and to have compassion in our interactions and to treat others as we would be treated.
Principle number 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. I signed the Unitarian membership book when I was just 16 years old in Brooklyn, Connecticut. And at that time of my life, I started having mystical experiences, precognitive dreams, retrocognitive dreams. And I was looking for a church where I would be accepted, that I could talk freely and be heard. And I reflect back upon how I felt that people actually listened to me and they took me seriously. And it was so important for a teenager to have that kind of acceptance. And 2 years later, I came back to the church from having spent a summer studying in France. And I was asked to give the Sunday morning address about my first time abroad. And I thought, oh my gosh, they want to hear me. They care about my voice. I'm just a teenager. And I look back at that experience, and I'm so thankful that I joined the church back then, because I really did feel accepted, and I did feel valued, that my voice was valued. And now, 58 years later, I can say that this church, since age 16, has done wonders for me. And 58 years later, it's still doing wonders for me. This principle is so beautiful, this third principle. I'm very thankful that this church is here. And everybody should know about this wonderful faith.
Fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. This privilege calls us not to be isolated and self-centered, believing that our single perspective trumps all others, but rather to be humble, to be open to the great mysteries of truth and the meaning that life offers. As a faith tradition, Unitarian Universalism makes sacred the right and responsibility to engage in this free and responsible quest as an act of religious devotion. Institutionally, we have left open the questions of what truth and meanings are, acknowledging that mindful people will, in every age, discover new insights.
Yes, you stole my paper. All right, this first part is taken from UU Minister Will Darkangelo. The words of the fifth principle of the Unitarian Universalist states that we affirm the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in the society at large. Right of conscience. What is the conscience? Conscience is defined as the inner sense of what is right or wrong in one's conduct or motives, impelling one toward right action. Impelling one. Fifth principle is insistent. It is demanding. It is impelling and it knows its own worth. It does not have to be taught its own sense of right or wrong, nor does it need to be told that it has the right to speak. It already knows this. The right of conscience. The fifth principle invokes this right, does not grant it. And of democracy, not just tolerating the voice of another, but raising it up as equal to our own. Hymns, chants, and unison prayers, even though we are all saying the same thing, are actually democratic intonings. Because every voice is unique. The sound heard from the group may be a single communal sound, but it emanates from the power of individual voices. People often feel they have no value as individuals, that they have nothing to contribute, but they're just one person. How can one person make an impact on anything they say? But choosing to value your own voice is not an act of egotism. It is an act of relationship and mutuality. Mutuality. It is an act of physical prayer that will have a ripple effect for you. The words of 19th century Unitarian preacher Theodore Parker. Democracy means not, I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. I struggle with that. I mean, some folks, we're good, we're fine, hey, say what you want, I love you, everything's good. And there's others that, frankly, I can't listen to you. I don't even want to look at your face. I click on here and there, it's like, oh God, you're disgusting, you know? And yet in my heart of hearts, I know that the way, it's not that. The way to true knowledge and the way to true serenity is to love everybody. Is to be able to sit there and stand there and listen to them with an open mind and an open heart. Frankly, it's a work in progress, you know? I know it in my heart of hearts, I know it. I'm practicing it, and it gets easier at points, you know, where in the song that we're Wednesday night, on the song that we're talking about, right hearing, right listening, be able to listen to those people. I was sitting this morning, lyric, Jackson Brown popped into my head. And well, the quote was, if I can look at you without crying, you might look like a friend of mine. It struck me that thought. You know, if I can look at those people, loving mind, they might look like a friend of mine too.
Our Unitarian Universalist sixth principle states, we are encouraged excuse me, and work towards the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. How could so few words, but simple, elicit so much rancor and confusion? Perhaps a lack of a universal, simplistic definition? Maybe. I, for one, rely on my involvement with the U.S. Army in Vietnam, Buddhist and Unitarian Universalist teachings, the teachings of Jesus Christ, Gandhi, and other like minds, works of art, and I use these as guideposts in my understanding of what meanings are attached to peace, liberty, and justice for all. I certainly am no arbiter of how to define or apply any singular definition of what peace, liberty, and justice looks like, especially under the myriad conditions that we live with or under. But I would posit that without peace, liberty, and justice, this human existence would be little more than an existence born out of a series of unfortunate events, leaving one with little to no hope of breaking out of this misery. Moving forward, this world has seen its share of deprivation and superstition that humankind had and has and is exacting on her, Mother Earth. And it's never too late to engage healing practices in love, respect, and nurturing in all that we endeavor. So let us roll up our sleeves and undertake whatever we can do in ensuring all lives thrive in peace, liberty, and justice.
Good morning. I have the seventh principle, that we covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. The interdependent web of existence, or what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, incorporates the entire universe. Everything is connected to everything else. For me, this is the most powerful of the principles, the guiding light, if you will. I strive to follow all of the principles, but this one connects us to everything in the universe, sentient and non-sentient. What we do to one, we do to all, including ourselves. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The golden rule is the basis for most of the world's religions. We humans know what we need to do and how we need to treat each other and the other inhabitants of our home. We just need to do it. I believe that the existential crisis facing us today is catastrophic climate change. It will ultimately affect everything and everyone on the planet. Unless humans wake up very soon, Gaia will continue, but life as we know it will not. If we understand that we are each other and the earth, and we show respect for all of the web of existence, then the earth can continue to support life as we know it. In the words of Reverend William Schultz, we affirm that every one of us is held in creation's hand, a part of the interdependent cosmic web, and hence all strangers need not be enemies, that no one is saved until we are all saved, where all means the whole of creation.
I'm going to talk about the proposed eighth principle, And first I want to give a little bit of backstory that I think makes sense. When you know that two diverse, in their own way, similar and yet diverse groups of people, Unitarians, which had traditionally been centered in urban areas in the United States, and Universalists, which had traditionally been centered in rural areas, agreed to come together and meld their two philosophies. People say to me, what is a Unitarian? Unitarians believe that all of the roads lead to the top of the mountain. And when you get to the top of the mountain, you find enlightenment. And so you can call it God or Allah or divine being or the goddess or whatever you want, but we're all looking for that same source of inspiration and light and reason. And Universalists decided that they did not believe in hell, that all dogs go to heaven. That's what I like to say, because poet Anne Sexton, who's one of my favorites, who was quoted earlier by Tim, she liked to call herself in her poetry Ms. Dog, because she had been told as a child in Catholic school that we're all reflections of God. If you spell God backwards, you get dog. So I liked her poems about Ms. Dog, which was herself being the small reflection of God. So Universalists believed that nobody was destined to go to hell, that there was no human soul that was irredeemable, that there was no dog that couldn't make it to heaven. And so when the two decided to come together, and that merger in 1961, the year my sister Sally, bless her, she's on the other side now, was born, they said, well, we need to have some kind of moral compass, even though we won't have a creed. We won't have a creed because we don't believe it's good to say, you have to believe according to this creed or you don't belong with us, because that's against what we believe. So how do we have something that gives us a moral compass and not have a creed? And that's how we came to the principles and then the traditions. And if you're ever curious, what exactly does it say again in the principles and the traditions? They're right in the front of our UU hymnal that's here in the pews, singing the living tradition. And so that's a good way to remind yourself. And also, our member, Victor, made a beautiful poster on the back of this sanctuary under the clock to the right of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. But when they came together in 1961, came up with the original version of the principles, they said, let's see what we can put together to come up with what we do believe in, and how do we distill all of this in a way that is more explicit, that lets people know what we believe in, and that's how we came to have these 7 principles. But they also said, periodically, we need to review, and we need to make changes, and we need to update, and we need to make it current and consistent with the society and the times that people are living in, which is how we ended up with these 7 principles that you see today, because those are not the originals from 1961. They are the version 2.0 that was created in the 1980s, after a lot of Unitarian Universalists noticed that there were words like brotherhood of man, mankind, etc., in the original Unitarian Universalist principles. And there were a lot of women who were finding their voices in the 1980s who said, well, wait a minute, it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. We're talking about all human beings. How can we revise those principles to make them reflective of the society that we live in today in the 1980s? And that's how we came to have the principles that you've been hearing. The proposed 8th principle has arisen because of all that's been pushing at the edges of our society in the past few years. And that is the one that's on the screen now. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. And the conversation that's been taking place over the past few years is, gee, is that really necessary? Isn't it already covered by the 7 principles that are already in place? And the reason why we keep having this conversation, and there's going to be a lot of conversation about it this summer at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, where youths from all around the country and beyond all come together, is because of things like the death of George Floyd and so many others that continue to happen because of the conversations that have been happening, which Florida's governor now calls wokeism. The conversations that have been happening over the past several years about oppression and how 500 years of colonialism affecting human society have led us to a point where it's necessary to have these conversations and to keep having these conversations. It really hurt me watching the news and seeing all the protests that happened in a little corner of Minneapolis near what's called Powderhorn Park, around Lake Powderhorn, that's shaped like a powder horn from the olden days, because that's where I lived when I lived in Minneapolis. And to know that someone had died there after saying, "I can't breathe," and that police had been at fault for this man's death, and that people around the world were moved to protest, really tore at my heart because I took it very personally. I lived in that community. People in that community were my neighbors. To think that if I lived there still, I could have walked outside and seen all that happened just really tore my heart. Recently, we had a presentation here on a Sunday morning about the proposed eighth principle, and we used a sermon from a minister in California, and he said, and this made sense to me, especially because of conversations I keep having with Buddhists who belong to the Sangha that meets here. He said, we have to put our beliefs into practice. We have to live our ideals. Why people keep promoting the eighth principle and why certain Unitarian Universalist congregations have already wholeheartedly adopted it and accepted it is because it affirms our commitment to put our beliefs into practice, to put our money where our mouth is, to put our actions where our mouth is, to put our lifestyle where our mouth is. And that's the thing that makes me proud to be a part of this church, is to know that we keep making decisions as individuals and as a whole that do those things, put our beliefs and our principles into action, whether it's our contributions to Halifax Urban Ministries so that people who need food will have food assistance, or it's our scholarship fund, which helps one of those at-risk students to go on from graduating high school, hooray, to a college career for whatever degree or for certificate program that they're choosing that they're led to, for the other things that we do, our support of God's Bathhouse, which gives people who are homeless a place where they can go and get cleaned up and wash their laundry. Putting our practices where our beliefs are on the same page is why this eighth principle has been proposed. And it is a part of our tradition to constantly look at what do we believe, how can we update and upgrade our principles and our traditions to make them fit the society that we live in now. Thanks.
Let's close our eyes, take a nice deep breath, and take a few moments to contemplate today's message.
Let's sing. Please rise.
Oh, below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling oceans. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. My universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, breathe the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. My universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Closing words today are from Evan Keeley. We know we don't have all the answers. Here, we can at least share all our questions. And here we can share a lot more than that. We can share our thoughts and ideas. We can share our pain and hope. Here, we can remember that we are not alone.
Don't read this one, guys. Repeat with me. Extinguish this flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of the community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Really, really soon. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. go.
Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Building up a world.
Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.